Deep within the cold, silent theater of our solar system, there is a world that is not allowed to die, but is never truly alive. It is a celestial body trapped in a cycle of perpetual, violent rebirth, a moon that exists in a state of physical agony so profound it defies human comprehension. We often look at the night sky and see the moon as a serene, silver sentinel, a symbol of peace. But if you look toward the king of planets, toward the gas giant Jupiter, you will find its most tortured subject. This is Io. It is not a world of rock and dust, but a festering wound in the side of the cosmos. It is the most volcanically active body in the known universe, and its existence is a testament to the sheer terrifying power of gravity, force we often mistake for a gentle anchor but which on Io is an instrument of torture. To understand Io is to understand the concept of a world being squeezed until it bleeds fire. It is caught in a gravitational tug-of-war that would shatter any lesser object. On one side, the immense crushing mass of Jupiter pulls with a strength that bends the very fabric of space. On the other, the neighboring moons, Europa and Ganymede, pull back, their orbits locking Io into an eccentric, unstable path. This constant stretching and compressing is known to science as tidal heating, but for the moon itself, it is a process of internal friction so intense that the very core of the planet remains a liquid furnace. The ground beneath Io's surface is not stable. It rises and falls by as much as 100 meters in a rhythmic, agonizing pulse. Imagine the solid earth beneath your feet bulging and collapsing like a heartbeat made of stone. This is the reality of Io, a world being kneaded like dough by the invisible hands of a cosmic giant. The surface of Io is a vision of hell that no poet could ever fully capture. It is a landscape of toxic yellows, vibrant oranges, and bruised purples, stained by the relentless output of sulfur and sulfur dioxide. There are no craters here. The volcanic activity is so frequent and so violent that any impact scars from the history of the solar system have long been paved over by fresh layers of molten rock. It is a world that erases its own history every few thousand years, a blank slate of fire. Thanks to the cold, unfeeling eyes of the James Webb Space Telescope, we have been able to peer into this distant inferno with terrifying clarity. What we found was not just a moon with volcanoes, but a moon that is effectively a single open-air volcano as a celestial body whose internal pressure is so high that it must incessantly vomit its own entrails across its surface just to survive the next hour. One of the most haunting features of this world is Loki. It is not merely a volcano. It is a gargantuan, deep, and unstable lake of lava, a sea of molten glass over 200 kilometers wide. Within this lake, a thick, solid crust periodically forms on the surface, a fragile skin of rock attempting to cool in the vacuum of space, but the heat from below is too great. The crust becomes too heavy, and in a cyclical catastrophe, it fractures and plunges back into the glowing, orange depths. This process repeats in an endless loop of destruction and rebirth, a churning maw of fire that has been active for millions of years. It is a place where the concept of ground is a lie, where the only certainty is the eventual collapse into the fire. In late 2022, the James Webb Space Telescope witnessed an eruption of extraordinary energy in a region known as Kanehekili Fluctus. It was a surge of heat so powerful that it could be detected across the vast, frozen reaches of the outer solar system. By the time the telescope looked again 9 months later, the lava flows had quadrupled in size, covering over 4,000 square kilometers in a fresh shroud of cooling obsidian. The scale of this transformation is staggering. On Earth, a volcanic event of this magnitude would be a global catastrophe, a civilization-ending disaster. On Io, it is merely a Tuesday. It is a world that does not care for stability, a world where the very idea of a permanent landscape is a joke played by the laws of physics. But the horror of Io is not limited to what we can see. The telescope also revealed the chemical signatures of sulfur monoxide, an excited, unstable form of gas that acts as a fingerprint for the most violent volcanic vents. This gas was found not just where the lava flows, but in regions where no volcanoes were visible. Scientists have begun to speak of invisible volcanism, underground processes, diffuse leaks of toxic gases through the cracked and broken crust, a silent subsurface pimple of fire that is always waiting to burst. The moon is riddled with these hidden wounds, vents that spew toxic sulfur into an atmosphere that is already a death trap. The atmosphere of Io is a thin, suffocating veil of sulfur dioxide. It is so fragile that when the moon passes into the shadow of Jupiter, the air itself freezes and falls to the ground like toxic snow. When the sun hits the surface again, the frost sublimates, turning back into gas in a ghostly, silent explosion of vapor. But even in the dark, Io is not quiet. It is surrounded by a plasma torus, a gigantic, glowing donut of charged particles stripped from the moon's atmosphere by Jupiter's powerful magnetic field. This torus is an electrical cage, a high-energy ring that pulses with millions of amps of electricity. Jupiter is effectively playing pinball with the electrons of Io's atmosphere, exciting the sulfur atoms and making the moon glow with a sickly, infrared light. It is a world that is being electrocuted as it is being burned. There is a consistent and unexpected stability in this total chaos. For decades, the system formed by Io's atmosphere and Jupiter's plasma torus has remained in a state of violent equilibrium. It is a kind of volcanic zen, a balance found at the edge of total annihilation. The moon is a restless, screaming entity, throwing tantrums that destroy its own surface, but it always calms down just enough to remain in its orbit, waiting for the next squeeze from its gas giant master. It is a world that exists to serve the gravity of Jupiter, a sacrificial lamb on the altar of planetary mechanics. When we look at Io, we see the dark side of the cosmic order. We are used to the idea of a universe that is finely tuned for life, a world where the sun provides warmth and the earth provides a stable platform. But Io is the rebuttal to that comfort. It is a reminder that the universe is just as capable of creating a finely tuned engine of suffering. Every mountain on Io is a monument to a tremor. Every river of lava is a vein of molten rock flowing through a body that cannot find rest. The sulfur gas seen uniformly distributed over the northern hemisphere is not just a chemical, it is the smell of a dying world that refuses to stay dead. The invisible volcanism discovered by our instrument suggests that we have only scratched the surface of the horrors occurring on Io beneath the crust. There are likely oceans of magma, vast reservoirs of molten rock that are constantly shifting, searching for a way out. The ground is a thin, brittle shell over an abyss of fire. If a human were to stand on the surface of Io, provided they could survive the lethal radiation of Jupiter's belts and the freezing vacuum of space, they would feel the vibration of 1,000 eruptions through the soles of their boots. They would see a sky filled with the plumes of sulfur reaching hundreds of kilometers into space. They would see Jupiter, not as a beautiful planet, but as an oppressive, all-consuming wall of clouds that fills half the horizon. This incandescent journey into Io's inferno is a reminder of the dynamic and violent nature of our solar system. We live on a peaceful planet, a rare sanctuary where the volcanoes are the exception, not the rule. We should be grateful that our moon is a dead silent rock, and not a vibrant, screaming hell. The sulfur monoxide that erupts on Io is a chemical warning, a signal from a world that is fundamentally hostile to the very concept of life. It is a world where science reveals increasingly fascinating details, but those details only serve to make the picture darker. All of the data collected by the James Webb Space Telescope leads to a single, consistent picture. Io is a world of total devastation. It is a moon that is being devoured from the inside out. The electrons from Jupiter's Torus that penetrate the atmosphere are not just a scientific curiosity. They are a form of celestial bombardment. The moon is a game table that lights up under the touch of a giant, a show that has been playing for billions of years without an audience, and it will continue long after we are gone. We must accept that Io is a place where hot is an understatement and eruption is the only form of weather. It is a celestial furnace fueled by the motion of the spheres. The tidal heating that melts its rocks is an unstoppable force, a consequence of the math that governs the stars. Io is the victim of its own position, a world that was born too close to a giant. Its destiny was written in the moment the solar system formed to be a world of fire. A moon of ash, a place that screams in the dark. As we continue to peer into the distant inferno of the outer solar system, we must prepare ourselves for what we find. The universe is not always a place of wonder. Sometimes, it is a place of terror. Io is the most extreme example of this truth. It is a reminder that the same forces that keep the planets in their orbits can also tear them apart. The gravity that gives us our seasons and our tides is the same gravity that squeezes Io until it bleeds. It is a cold mathematical reality that does not care for our feelings or our survival. In the end, Io is a kind of volcanic zen, a stable balance in the midst of total, unceasing chaos. It is a world that has found its rhythm in the middle of an explosion. It is a moon that is constantly evolving, constantly changing, yet always remaining the same hellish nightmare. It is a reminder of the dynamic and violent nature of the cosmos, a place where the ground never stops moving and the fire never goes out. And as we look at the stars from our safe, distant home, we should remember the world that screams, the moon that is being torn apart, and the gas giant that refuses to let go. This is the story of Io. This is the hell that we have discovered in the dark.